Now let's talk about table saws today. Little table saw 101. So one of the very first things you want to do is, before you use your table saw, is check to make sure that it is 90 degree if you're going to make a straight cut. So we should go ahead and wind up our saw as far as it'll go. And then just take a square, drop it in between one of the teeth there, and make sure that you have a good 90 degree angle there. And if you don't, as I didn't when I first started, my table saw drifted a hair. You'll see a gap start to develop where your table saw is there. So we'll just go kind of extreme. So you can see there's a gap right there. So make sure that you get that nice and square, because all of your cuts are going to be coming off of that. And today we're going to be cutting some plywood and doing some dados, and we just want everything to be nice and square. Perfect. Okay. So when you're cutting a board, typically you want to take a piece of whatever material you're cutting and put it up next to it. And you don't want to be more than like 1/4 of an inch above it, maybe 1/8 to 1/4 is standard. Now when you're working with plywood, as we are, there's a lot of times there's warping in it, and if you go by that standard, safety standard for cutting like small boards and that sort of stuff, it can actually be more dangerous, because the boards will actually skip up and over the top of it and bind and do weird things. So when you're cutting a big full sheet of plywood, usually I'll go 1/2 inch or so, depending on what I'm cutting. Anyhow, let's talk about cutting plywood and how to keep it straight. As a general rule, when you have a full sheet of plywood, if you're just coming straight behind it and pushing right here with your force pushing forward, it'll tend to drift away from your table. So what I do when I have a full sheet of plywood and I'm standing at the back corner of it, is I actually push like that. I'll push into the fence and it'll keep it lined up, and then as I get up here close to it, then I just switch over and push straight forward. Let's go ahead and see how that works. And of course, as always, safety first. Okay, so we've cut one 20-inch piece out of this board. We're going to cut another 20-inch piece. And as a general rule, when you're cutting a large sheet like this, you would flip this then to the factory edge that hasn't been cut, just so you get the most consistent cut possible. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll cut one more. Alright, couple cut, and a whole lot more to go. One thing that you always want to do when you're cutting any board on a table saw is to make sure that you've pushed the board all the way through. If you haven't, and you leave a portion of the board still in between the fence and the blade, what happens is it can bind, and when it binds, all of a sudden you have a rocket heading back that way. So it's very important whenever you're cutting with a table saw that you push your material all the way through past the end of the saw blade, so that you don't have it come back and hit you, or come back and take the window out in your car or what have you. It's very dangerous. So make sure that you always push your material all the way through past the cut. As I said before, sometimes plywood can have a pretty good bow to it, so that's why I typically set the table saw a little higher when I'm cutting on plywood, is because it has a pretty good bow a lot of times. This stuff works than normal because it's from a bargain second discount store. I'll give you a quick little tour of the table saw. Motor on it right there. As you can see, it is a jet. I got some various stuff down in the storage cabinet underneath of it. The reason I bought it, first of all, was because it had exact defense on it. It was up to 55. Needed a table where I could cut big full sheets of plywood and big long cuts on, and previous table only had like a 20-foot rip fence off on the one side. So bought this off Craigslist for $125 4 or 5 years ago, and served me well. Speaking of safety, I put my glasses on, my earplugs in, and doesn't have a riving knife or a blade guard on it, so shame on me. I need to get one for that. So, anyhow, that's the mighty jet table saw, and it does quite well for me.